Hey, everybody. Welcome to Storytellers with Coffee. This week, we are delighted to have several of the writers and devs for Technocracy Reloaded. Hooray! Uh, so, we're going to start off with a brief round of introductions. Just going, uh, let's see, I don't want to take any risks, so we'll go clockwise based on the on our overlay. So let's start with Hiromi. If you want to talk a little bit about who you are, what you're up to.
Hi, I'm Hiromi. I freelance on RPGs. I am not usually super conscious about this time of day, so I'm. So now it's fun. I got into RPG writing through Seder for various mage books. I think everything that has come out. No, never mind. I was going to say, I think everything for the past 4 years I've worked on, but that's not true because I had very little to do with Book of the Fallen.
Yeah, that was. But, yeah, you were part of the brain trust for it.
I helped like this much. I like gave you a little nudge up the hill as you trudged up that thing, dragging a giant fucking boulder behind you.
Yeah, a bit of a Sisyphean task, I would imagine.
I also write queer genre fiction, mainly sci-fi and fantasy, but a little bit of horror there too. I also make video games, but right now I only have 2 things out, one of which won an award, which was cool, but they're...
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah, congrats.
But the biggest, funnest game is yet to come. It is all about punching Nazis. Like, literally, that's all you do.
I'm also working on a game called Punching Nazis.
Somehow that has become a theme lately. I can't imagine what might have brought that up in the world.
Neat. Well, we are happy to have you. Travis, introduce yourself, talk a little bit about what you're up to.
Hi, I'm Travis Legg. I am a freelance writer and game developer. In addition to being one of the developers that worked on Technocracy Reloaded, I am also the line developer for Scarred Lands, the Onyx Path's 5th edition fantasy role-playing game, and one of my favorite things that's ever happened in the universe ever. So it's been really strange because I am currently working on, literally no exaggeration, no bullshit, no blowing smoke, my 2 favorite game settings that have ever been game settings. So as long as, if I could just write an issue of Spider-Man, I could keel over dead happy tomorrow. So that's the thing keeping me going. When I'm not doing all that stuff, I am the programming developer for the Twitch channel, and I also do some stuff on my own Twitch every once in a while. I think that's it. Yeah, that's me.
Neat. Happy to have you as well.
Happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Kat, if you want to introduce yourself, what you're up to.
Yes, I'm Kat Evans. I'm another freelance writer and game designer. I know I'm the only person on this screen currently who hasn't worked on Mage, but, you know, I'm not dead yet. There's still time. Hire me. I am working on the new Werewolf the Apocalypse edition that's coming out next year, and
neat.
Yeah, and working on Altered Carbon, the RPG, and I have a bunch of other stuff all over community content programs all over the internet.
Sounds like a lot of fun. And last but not least, Seder.
Hello. Hi, Soteros Filbrucato, aka That Damn Mage Guy. Been writing professionally for 31 years. My published credits include all this shit back here. And
this is stack, sir.
Yeah, it's a lot of that. Have worked on all of the World of Darkness lines except for Hunter and Demon, but most associated with Mage and Werewolf. And I had also I'd been the line developer for Mage between '93 and '98, and then Mage 20 from 2012 until this fall. Technocracy Reloaded is my last book as Mage developer, but I'm continuing to write Mage books for the Storytellers Vault, and one of them is in editing right now, which is Mage Made Easy.
Nice. Can't
And
wait to see that.
That is super awesome.
It's a lot smaller than usual.
It is.
It's only this big.
And
But I can use M20 as a desk.
it does precisely what it says on the tin too, and that is, I think, the highest compliment one could pay to Mage Made Easy is it does exactly what it says in the tin. It makes that 900,000 page ancient tome simple and easy to engage with, and that's super cool.
For anyone who's watching who hasn't already seen it, this is the massive tome he's referring to.
Yeah, it's a binding breaker for sure. It's big book.
Fun story. I bought a physical copy of M20 at GameHallCon in 2018, and to get back to the UK with it, I had to throw out 2 pairs of shoes.
Oh my god. Then again, I'm not a fan of shoes, so I'm kind of like, yeah, that's a good
You don't
trade-off.
need more than 1 pair of shoes.
Right, that's fair.
But thank you.
So let's start with the controversial questions. What's your
Ooh.
favorite coffee-like beverage?
Chai, and lots of it. Lots of chai. I can't stand the taste of coffee. I love the way it smells. Can't stand the taste of it, which makes me a bad Seattleite.
Oh no!
Yeah, you're
Well,
allowed to say that.
It does make the aroma of the city pleasant, I would imagine, though, right? Like, don't you just encounter random wild coffee odors as you walk through?
Mm-hmm.
That's actually true.
So,
So, fun fact. Downtown Seattle has no fewer than 1 coffee shop per block. And I don't mean like the entire block. I mean each facing of the block. That's not an exaggeration.
It's
Honestly,
not an
There is
wouldn't have
no
been
place
surprised
in
if you'd said
downtown
per
Seattle.
capita.
Sorry, what?
I would not have been surprised if you'd said per capita.
1 coffee shop per person.
That's probably not much of an exaggeration either.
Wow.
I'm out in LA. I was really happy when Dunkin' Donuts made it back out here. They have really good coffee.
Yeah, we in Rockford we have bullets. That's what we have in Rockford, just bullets. Drink some bullets in the morning. I'm just saying there's a little bit of gunshots in the morning, yeah.
I guess my favorite coffee type beverage is whatever I have.
Fair.
Like right now it's a Colombian blend, but I mean if it's chai, then if chai is closer, then it's chai. If it's Genmai chai, then it's Genmai chai. Whatever. I deeply need the caffeine. By which I mean I should not have the caffeine because then I can eventually detox and, function normally without coffee. But that's going to be unpleasant. So in the meantime,
you got shit to do anyway.
There you go.
Travis and Hiromi are 2 of the busiest people I know, and that's saying a lot.
I take that as a very, very high compliment. Thank you. And yes, I know how busy Hiromi is. Holy cow! Because I've been trying to squeeze words out of them for every project I can, and we got about a 60-70% rate, I think, of you being able to hop onto things that I've offered.
I think so.
Every once in a while,
a lot of work down lately.
No, it's true. Every once in a while, it's like too much.
Which is part of the thing.
So, Kat,
I did have to turn down work for the newest Scion book, which made me real sad.
That is sad.
Because Scion's fucking great. Saints and something.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
Sounds like it'll be fun.
Scion is... I have not had a chance to work directly on Scion, but it sounds super fun.
I had a lot of fun with Scion First Edition. I didn't work on Scion First Edition, but I played it. I had a lot of fun. I inadvertently broke the shit out of the rules and ended up with a defense dice pool of like 25, and it went up when I was surprised.
Are you sure you sure you weren't playing Aberrant by mistake?
No
Maybe.
I
Some exalted.
I wanted to have a character that was fast. I was playing the Scion of a Messenger God. I just wanted to be fast, so I took everything that would make me faster. That breaks the shit out of Scion First Edition.
It's good to know that they've fixed that so well with the Storypath system. They really have reined it in, and yet not in a glorious way. So, Kat, do you have a favorite coffee or coffee-like beverage?
The honest answer is whatever is closest. But if I want to look cool, then it's a soy latte made with some kind of Guatemala bean.
I was gonna say, is drinking coffee like? I'm gonna sound really ignorant American for a second here. Is that still frowned upon on that side of the pond?
Oh, heck no. Heck no. Sometimes I have to lie and say that I can tolerate tea. And if anybody from my family is watching, I've just outed myself. But no, we have a Starbucks on just about every block now, so it's fine.
Beautiful. Excellent. My favorite vector for caffeine is Diet Mountain Dew, but I'll, Folgers if we're talking just coffees. It's a good old cup of Folgers.
Okay. So now that we've got the coffee part covered on Storytellers with Coffee, let's get to the storytelling part, and in specific, how to run Technocracy as a storyteller. So I guess the first question is, and people in the Twitch who are watching, if there's something that you want to know about running Technocracy, feel free to ask. So to start off with, I'm a big proponent of letting themes guide your game. And so when a storyteller decides to create a story about the Technocracy, what themes would you advise they keep in mind? And what sort of experience should they try and create for their players?
Well, one of the for me personally, the biggest the dominant theme involved with the Technocracy is control, because there's a long-standing debate about the nature of the Technocracy. People be like, but they're not like scientists. No, they're not about science. They're not even so much about technology. The primary goal of the Technocratic Union is control, because to members of the Technocracy, the world is batshit crazy pants, which when you're talking about the world of darkness, they're not wrong. And
Right.
It's full of monsters. Again, they're not wrong. It is dangerous for humanity. They're not wrong. And so therefore, it is the duty of people who are in the enlightened elite to take control of this crazy batshit world in order to advance humanity. Whether humanity agrees with that advancement or not, the Technocratic Union is absolutely certain that their vision for the future is the best possible outcome in a field full of bad outcomes.
See, I conceptualize my technocrats in terms of lines and where the right side of the line is, because exactly like Satira said, the Technocracy is about control, right? But it's control for humanity's own good. The Technocracy are kind of needed, but at some point protection tips over into imprisonment, and at some point you have to start asking who benefits, where's the line between helping and controlling, and that kind of thing.
Travis or Hiromi, do you have?
Yeah. So like George Orwell threw out the concept of authoritarian control as being Big Brother, which like that wording invokes specific ideas, because like if someone is supposed to be a big brother, then like they're supposed to be familial but also kind of in charge of you and controlling, which is essentially what the Technocracy like conceptually does. Like they internally they're like, we're all part of humanity, and we want to look out for you. And at a certain level, and where that level is depends on your chronicle. That level is how much they dictate what's good for you. So if you're playing a traditions campaign, then it's probably everything they do is too far, and they need to get the fuck out. But like using the technocracy where they're just like mustache twirling evil fuckers is, I think, missing a whole lot of the fun that you could have with them. And honestly, if you want to play mustache twirling evil fuckers, play Spirit of the Century. Like, it's designed for that.
Right. There are other games to dive into for that type of content.
How about you, Travis? Any thoughts on themes and experiences?
This is probably not a thing that I should ever admit publicly as a professional writer, but theme is probably the thing I have the hardest time wrapping my lobes around. I just tend to attack like certain beats or moments that I find to be either like satisfying or challenging, and try to build outward from there, right? Try to construct those organically, and figure out how to get to those sort of moments organically. An example, I had a game I was running about 3 years, mage game, where the players were all playing tradition mages, except for there was one hollow one, and every tradition was represented. It was a big group. Probably took 10 years off my life to run. But in the sort of climax, as we got through that, they really started to go toe-to-toe with Technocracy. And there came a scene in that campaign where the Hollow One, who had become the leader of their group, was sort of sitting, just having a chat with like the man in white that they were opposed to, and he says to her, the last time you went to the bathroom, where did you go? You went inside a house. Were you eaten by a dragon on your way there? Do you have running water? Where? Why? Do you really want to go back to that? Sure, we might have some disagreements about the how do you get there, but can any reasonable person argue that we're not better off than we were? And that's where I like to frame the Technocracy from, is put them, whether they be protagonists or antagonists, put them in a position where not only do you see like the horrible shit that gets carried out in the name of pursuing their goals, but also all the reasoning behind it and appealing to that logical, like, but shit, they have a point. I did pee inside today with lights. Like, and that counts for something, And so I think the theme, or the thing that I would want to invoke, no matter where the players fall on the spectrum, is where do their characters fall with that? At what point, what are the things that their characters are and are not willing to accept in exchange for that comfort? And how far do you push back? What do you risk in order to break those chains? I think that's a relevant question socially, not only throughout the existence of Mage, but particularly now, right? Like, yeah. Where do you draw your lines? Where do you say, what fights do you pick, right? And I think that can work either side. If you're playing a technocratic, facing game where the players are technocrats, or if you're playing tradition mages, at what point do you? Because it's fun to throw a room full of black suits into like awakened last week mages that all have an Arte too. That's fun, and watching them panic is fun, but there's way more story you can have. You know what I mean? Like you can get those beats in those moments, but there's way more. If that's all you're doing, yeah, like Hiromi said, you're wasting a lot of opportunity.
Yeah, and so, oh, I'm sorry, did you have something?
Oh, it just hit me while you were talking. If you view the while Travis was talking, if you view tradition mages as those idiots running around in their Walmart camos, with their guns at the state capitol, if you view tradition mages like that, the Technocracy makes a whole hell of a lot more sense.
Shit. I'm gonna need a minute.
So that actually feeds.
Well, I think you sold the Technocracy guide to everybody watching.
So that really feeds into my next question, which I think is one of the biggest questions about the Technocracy. Are they the bad guys? And are they the worst bad guys in the world of darkness? So, as a player, whenever Technocracy has shown up, they've always been the antagonists, but that's because we're vampires and werewolves and not regular people.
Mm-hmm.
So, are they bad guys? Are they antagonists? What's their role?
One of the things with Mage is there's no, okay, the Nefandi are bad guys. I mean, and they own that. That's right on the tin. And they're like, yeah, there needs to be evil, and so I'm evil. But aside from the Nefandi and maybe like the Bali, and the Black Spiral Dancers, kinda-ish, World of Darkness doesn't really have bad guys. World of Darkness is... It's all shades of gray, splattered with blood, basically, and especially in Mage, and people who are really familiar with Mage have heard this a million times. My biggest influence on my approach to Mage was Akira Kurosawa's film Rashomon, which is about a crime that is being discussed from 4 different perspectives, and every perspective is different. A guy is dead, another guy killed him, the guy who killed him had sex with the dead man's wife. These things are irrefutable. Everything surrounding that, however, is open to argument and interpretation. And as one of the characters says at one point, he says, the more I hear, the more confused I get. That on a lot of levels is Mage in a nutshell, because what you literally have, the game is literally about reality wars between different groups of people who literally change reality through their actions. And so every one of those people, regardless of their faction or regardless of their ideals, every one of those people believes that they are bringing the ultimate, they are bringing reality in the direction that they feel reality should be brought. The fact that they're all like this with each other, including people who are on the same side, is part of our commentary on utopian idealism and the whole good guy bad guy concept. Because like I said a moment ago, and as you said, if you view those folks in their camos and everything, rifle butting people and screaming about their freedoms, you get inside their head, they absolutely, they're scared, and justifiably so. They're angry and justifiably so. They want things back the way they think things were. And that's understandable. I don't agree with them on that one, but it's a perfectly understandable viewpoint. And so they are talking about, overthrowing the Democratic governor and comparing Jewish people to Nazis. We're gonna fucking part company there, folks. But when you get inside their head, that seems perfectly reasonable. When you get outside their head, you look at them and go, "What the fuck is wrong with you people?"
Right.
So Mage is very much the same way. Whether you're talking about the traditions, the Technocracy. I mean, and I went into this in the first chapter of A Book of the Fallen. Even the Nefandi, to a degree, think that they've got the ultimate right answer. It's just the right answer is humanity is a virus and creation should die. And if we can have some fun with that, so much the better, because we're all damned anyway.
An extra dark answer.
Yeah, that's regardless. But it's not like I haven't known people who think that, though. I mean, that's one of the things that made writing that book so scary.
Right.
It's not like there aren't people like that in real life. It's not like people in real life won't read that book and think that the Nephandic narrator had the right idea, which sickens me, honestly. But
Well, and I think
so
all of it is seductive, you know?
it is.
And I
Oh
think,
yeah,
you know, just to piggyback on what you said about the factions, hell, within the traditions, right? You look at the differences in opinion. You look at the differences in what they have historically done. You look in the like things they've done to one another. You know what I mean? Like, it's very easy as a mage player to or a mage storyteller to sit and lay all the sins of colonialism at the feet of the technocracy. But the reality of the situation is the traditions had a whole lot to do with what was going on there, and a whole lot to do with, you know, not showing up when the pact that they had made, you know, not honoring that pact when people were like, hey, a bunch of your European buddies are over here kicking up a ruckus. Want to come help? No. You know, was the resounding answer from several of the traditions. So, I mean, I think looking at those aspects of it as well, it's really about the perspective, being able to put yourself in that mindset and say, well, how is this point of view? How is this point of view? I don't advocate for ever putting yourself in a Nephandic mindset.
Preferably not. But yeah, I think what...
Yeah,
Sorry.
Go ahead. No, please, go ahead.
So just kind of tying together what you've both said, I think what's cool about Mage is, and what's cool about the Technocracy is, it's not the ideology that makes them scary, it's the ideology plus power. And the reason the Technocracy are the antagonists in this game is because currently they have the power. And if anybody's played like Renaissance Mage or pre-Enlightenment Mage, that's completely flipped, and it is the same game from a slightly different perspective.
Thank you. And yeah, and Mage 20, and I think it's worth addressing for folks who aren't familiar with Mage 20. In Mage 20, the Technocracy are not necessarily antagonists. In Mage 20, the Technocracy, the traditions, and the crafts are all equally viable and are presented as equally valid character options. Mage 20 is not about the traditions versus the Technocracy, and in a lot of places in Mage 20 books, I say, you know what? If you don't like the meta plot, fucking throw it out. Mage is not about the meta plot, and the preludes running through the opening preludes for a number of the Mage 20 books, including Mage 20 itself, are actually about reconciling differences between the traditions and the Technocracy, because you've got two longtime signature characters from the old Mage days, Leanne Milner of the Cult of Ecstasy and John Courage of the Technocracy, who are both long established characters who, at the beginning of Mage 20, you find out that the two of them have a mutual history that goes back to the early 90s, and that the two of them continue to go around what they're supposed to be doing in order to help each other, and that both of them are facing something that's worse than either the Technocracy or the traditions, and recognizing that we're going to need to work together on this, which we're all together on this, and we're facing something a whole lot bigger than our internal divisions, is a major theme in Mage 20 itself. Because fuck it, it's a major theme right now in the real world.
Right, absolutely. And just to address that, and I'm also sort of tracking the conversations happening in chat. I see Hiromi's being active in it. But one of the major themes, I don't think this is spoiling anything, or one of the major ideas that's presented in Technocracy Reloaded, is the idea that the Technocracy has come to a point where it has to own some of its shit in a way that it never has in Mage so far. You know, and not always from the sort of, for lack of a better term, like the feel-good, happy, fluffy reasons, right? Some of it's very technocratic in its approach. We have learned to start avoiding and working to avoid colonialism, as an example, because it's inefficient.
Mm-hmm.
Never mind the right, the wrong, though. So this just creates more problems than it solves. We are better suited to work with the people that are established in a society than we are to shove our way in and take what we want. We had a long discussion. I did Mage's podcast with Danielle. There was a long discussion about gender identity, sexuality, and all these sorts of identity elements in the technocracy. And the technocracy doesn't care. They don't care what your gender identity is. They don't care, who you love and how you love. That's all fine. The other side of that coin is they don't care. So they don't celebrate those differences. They don't, you go ahead and get whatever body you want from the progenitors. Once you've earned the social right to a marriage, you can marry however you like. Once your performance is spot on, your op tempo is right, then you can have a marriage. But it doesn't matter to them in any respect. And so, is that good? Is it maybe the right idea for the wrong reasons? Maybe, but these are the things that you can explore narratively, and then you as your character, the avatar that you're inhabiting for this experience, can decide how do you fall on these things, and how do you engage with this society, and kind of, I think, fulfilling something that Mage has kind of always done, much to Sater's credit, using that as sort of a catharsis and kind of a roadmap for finding your ways of engaging these things in the real world. As you're coming back out, you're taking these experiences you've had in this sort of fantastical setting and being able to apply those lessons. Because at the end of the day, there are a lot of the same similar issues we're dealing with in the real world. Not to put a bunch of words in your mouth, Sater, but,
No, you're right.
Hiromi, I don't think we've heard from you on this question.
No, and I wanted to tag on to Travis pointing out that anti-colonialism is a thing that we ended up sort of dealing with, especially with Technocracy Reloaded. And part of the thing there is that colonialism, and especially Western-fronted ideology, ends up kind of falling apart once you realize that if everyone in the world has access to magic or hypertech or whatever you want to refer to it, that playing field gets leveled fast. So when you have X number of Western technocrats, and then you have X times 2 technocrats in Asia, because that's the way population works, folks.
right.
Actually, it's going to be more than times 2, but anyway. The folks hanging out in China, India, Japan, hearing all of these ideas are going to be like, you know what? No. How much control do you have over us? As much as we let you have? Okay. So we're going to move in the direction that you have specified, but you don't get to control it as much as you would like to, because you can't fucking stop us.
Right.
We are just as, if not more technocratic than you are from a purely historical basis. Never mind meta plot. China kind of invented technocrats.
Well, and that would be an interesting thought experiment, right? Like if you could hop in the DeLorean and go back to 91, that really would be I would think one very valid approach to, if you wanted to build a technocratic union, have it be entirely based, out of Asia. But again, different time, different people working on the book. When Mage First Edition was conceived of, you couldn't hop on the internet and talk to somebody who was on the other side of the continent in real time, who had familial and cultural experience with that, right? Which is how you wind up with things like insert laundry list of things from First Edition World of Darkness here.
Satyrs face.
I mean,
But on the other side, though, to the credit of the people at the time, you can obviously tell research was done, right? Doing the best with the tools you got. We just have different tools.
We've
now.
got to do this book in 2 weeks. Let's take a run down to Barnes and Noble, because Amazon.com doesn't exist, Wikipedia doesn't exist, Google doesn't exist, the internet barely exists, and Facebook and YouTube and stuff like that won't exist for 10 or 15 years.
Yeah.
That's
Right.
one of the weird, and I think we were talking about this before we got started, but that's for me being 55 and doing this now for over 30 years, and doing Mage for almost 30 years, 28 years as of this summer, 27 years as of this summer. That's one of the things that's both been fascinating and frustrating is knowing what we had to work with back then and seeing what we have to work with now, and both being like, man, I wish back in 1993 I could have gotten together a group of people on Facebook and gone, hey, is this accurate? And on the other hand, having people write 2,000-word screeds about how evil I am for queer erasure. Hi, identified as queer since the early 80s. For queer erasure, because I'm not using because a book written in 1998 didn't use terms that didn't exist in 1998. And if we could go back to to the origins of Mage, yeah, a whole lot of things would be very different. A big thing that my team and I back in the early days with first edition, which was basically written in about 3 weeks. Once I came on as Mage developer, we had to make sense of first edition, which essentially the entire back history of these 9 traditions plus these hollow ones plus these 5 conventions boiled down to, there was a Mythic Ages, and then the evil Technocracy came and Copernicus rearranged the universe, and now nobody believes in magic. I'm like, okay, none of those things work. How are we going to I can't get rid of these and throw all of that out. So how do we take these ideas that are presented in the first edition rulebook and make them make sense in terms of real life history and occult history? And there were awkward compromises, obviously. And one of the big ones was that we did not have any or access to any Asian writers until the 2000 something. And so everything that we did about every culture that we couldn't find a writer to work with was filtered through basically, what you could find on a bookshelf at Barnes and Noble, the local library. And now we can fix that.
Yeah,
So that's what we're doing.
That's what new editions are for. That's why you
Mhm.
come out with second edition, fourth edition, fifth edition, because ideas change and the hobby evolves and the culture evolves. And so, it's always good to update the
Mhm.
old stuff.
Well, and even speaking as somebody who has active memories during my teenage years of dialing my friend's house on my rotary phone, right? The difference, I think, sometimes because we get wrapped up in our own shit up here, the level of access we have now, the level of ability we have now, level of ability we have to engage with voices that we couldn't we did not have easy access to 20 years ago. It is really radically different. And I hope that's showing in the direction that things are going in terms of not only ensuring that people are being hired to work on these books that have that experience as opposed to, you know, people who just, you know, ran to Barnes and Noble. And even saying that sounds dismissive, but like that's what you had, right? So I hope that the benefit of that is showing in the work now, you know, and I can only go by what the audience says, right? I can tell you that effort's being done on that front. You know,
who knows? 20 years from now, people will look back on what's coming out right now, and they'll probably have a lot to criticize because the thoughts will have moved forward.
I mean, I
And
hope
that's
they do,
good.
because otherwise we've gone backwards.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's part of the big dispute in fandom in general, and World of Darkness fandom in particular, is the people who are like, no, this is a political correctness agenda of the liberal mafia and rah, 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 rah. And it's like, first of all, have you read any of those books that we've written, like ever? But also, it's we're still carrying. Mark was right in this in this part of the observation is, back in the early 90s and all the way through, we were trying to be as progressive as possible under the circumstances. We didn't always succeed, but progressive also had really, really super different definitions, and there were totally different conversations, as well as many of the same ones being held in different terminologies 25, 30 years ago. Some of us are bringing those conversations forward, and some people don't like that.
Right. And oh, go ahead.
Oh, I got into it on Reddit. People were getting upset over the rumor that you might have 3 gender options in Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines 2. And I just have.
You got 3 gender options in this chat.
My response was like, Sasha Vikos would like to have a word with you?
Right.
Exactly.
Divismal has arms. That's all I can say. Yeah, no, it's mind-boggling to me that, like, well, I guess I know you probably can't dive too deep into this, Kat, because it's something that you're actively working on. But you're actively working on Werewolf 5th Edition. Werewolf is a game that has some historical baggage. People look at that, the ideas that were first put forth in Werewolf, and go, justifiably so, right? My assumption, based on literally everything I've seen so far about it, and the team that's working on it, and everything else that I know to be true in the universe, is that there is some effort being expended in the creation of Werewolf 5th Edition to overcome, alter, and adjust those things accordingly. Would that be a fair assessment?
That is a fair assessment, and you're right. I can't say much because otherwise Ivan poofs in behind my shoulder and strangles me. That's actually in my contract.
You got to read the fine print on that.
You know what? I did, but for that per word rate. No, there is, as someone said in the chat, a hell of a lot of historical baggage to unpick, but like, it's not briefly, as easy as you all think. It's not as easy as, not anyone in this chat, but it's not as easy as some people out there think it is, because these stories are really, really tightly interwoven, and they've grown over 30 years. And you have to either be willing to chuck out great swathes of canon to make things fit with what we now understand to be a better way of talking about some of these issues. Oh my God, so many better ways of talking about some of these issues. Or you have to be willing to keep some of that uncomfortable stuff there and justify it and confront it in what you write in the next edition. And it's really, really hard to find a balance between that will make everybody happy and won't make the internet explode.
Yeah, briefly giving a high five to you folks on the book. and whoever was the dev on that, like you have canon that includes like the Wendigo. Like you have like a faction that's like someone's religion. Like you have like that's like northern. I want to say mainly in like the BC area now, like indigenous culture. Like that's just a faction, and 20 years ago, people were like, that's a cool idea. Let's just throw this in here. And in order, like, and you hired James High, like an actual indigenous writer and historian, and like, holy shit, it's a good fucking hire. Because if someone's gonna do that right, it's gonna be James. I have
Honestly,
no idea what sections he's working on, but holy shit.
I couldn't possibly comment, but I think anybody who knows James and knows James's brand might be able to make some sensible suggestions. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I really look forward
Good call.
to what you come out with.
Yeah, no, it's gonna be I'm very excited for it. But you know, and the whole reason I bring that up is just because, you know, this isn't anything that's A, gonna go away, and B, you know, doesn't require that sort of upfront, you know, confrontation. I believe it was the word that you used. You know, and you know, with the section that Hiromi was talking about with, well, hell, the character that Hiromi is playing in the actual play that we're doing on Tuesday nights, not to turn literally everything into a plug, but the whole purpose of that is working out sort of these east-west perceptions that are just crap from earlier editions. You know, but again, and the best way to do that is to speak with, you know, someone who has the experience culturally, has the background, has the understanding to do that. There's no substitute to that. But as shitty as it is, that's a relatively new understanding in our little field of entertainment. You know? And I certainly hope, if anyone says the new guy, if anyone you know, has a objection or issue with previous mage material, I have zero grounds to argue against that, and I would just encourage them to check out the stuff that's in Mage 20, the stuff that's in Technocracy Reloaded, as a way of addressing that, and without, I think, at any point sacrificing the edge, as some of the more interesting components of the fan base worry about. You don't have to be an asshole to be edgy.
Well, and that's the ridiculous thing. The ridiculous thing about that statement is this is the edge.
Right.
They wouldn't be so upset about it if it wasn't.
Right. Yeah, just all that good stuff.
Yeah, so we have wandered very far afield, but it's good stuff.
You do that.
It's good stuff.
What? 4 writers went off topic? How did that happen?
I know.
Never.
Yeah, so I guess we have concluded that the Technocracy are probably not bad guys.
No.
Did we
Well,
conclude that?
They do horrible things for what are at least theoretically the right reasons, but they do horrible things, and we don't whitewash that at all. So
leading. I'm sorry.
Oh, just saying it's a. Whether or not the hero is a hero, you know, whether or not a warrior is a hero or a murderer depends on what side of his sword you happen to be on.
That's true.
And that's why the Technocracy is so much fun as player characters.
Yeah. So
for every individual in that organization, the line's going to be different.
So in that vein, if you could join any of the technocratic conventions, which would you pick and why?
I don't even need to think twice about that. If I could just like snap my fingers and be a technocrat, I would be in a black suit before I finished my sentence.
I want that sweet syndicate bank balance, baby.
I hate the syndicate, but I love them, as evidenced by the fact that I'll be playing one.
I was so excited to see that you're playing a syndicate agent because they are my favorite convention, because it's a different kind of. I love the science evil of the progenitors in Iteration X, but I also love the social science evil of the New World Order, and I love the cultural evil of the syndicate.
Hiromi, what about you?
Sorry, was answering a question in the chat because someone was like, what did Technocracy Reloaded do with the Download Loshai? And I'm like, fucking wrecked them. That's right. Nothing in them makes any goddamn sense.
And thank you for that.
Refer to them by actual words in the first place. I mean, Dalush, I made it up. That was a phrase. It was one of those. I have to have a name for this. I have to have it in 15 minutes. Okay, and it's an invented word. So people going, it's the canon. The canon is established. Fuck the canon. I made it up in 5 minutes.
And the more you speak to writers, the more you'll find that's true about the things that maybe you hold dear as being some indispensable linchpin of this massive world building that's been done. No, dude, that was a deadline, yo. Like, we swap it out for something better. Holy crap!
Friday evening, so I wrote it. Damn.
Swap it out for something better.
With canon purists who are like, well, this book says this thing, and this book says something contradictory about the world of darkness, and let's come up with really convoluted fan theories to reconcile them. And like, that's cool. It's good that you enjoy doing that, but you also need to recognize this was written by someone trying to make word count.
And I love post-food court or mid-food court post-coital debates about the Man of Steel as much as anybody else does. To quote fucking Kevin Smith, okay? I like nerding out and shit, that's fine. But you have to come to the understanding that this stuff is really like, it's not the part where every role-playing book says, use what works at your table. This is your story. Take what works and chuck the rest. Like, that's the important part of the book.
Let's be real. If you're playing Mage of the Ascension, and you've been playing Mage of the Ascension for 20 years, and you're concerned about like a static, unchanging canon, you might have missed some of the point in the material.
That's true. But I feel like we just, again, tangented and let Hiromi off the hook. So...
No. I've been waiting. No, it's okay. So, I would go with Void Engineers with holy shit caveats. So right now, Void Engineer in current canon, in my understanding, is kind of the least morally ambiguous. Because all of the other factions deal with humans, and when you deal with humans, you can deal with them incorrectly. And the Void Engineers deal with humans a whole lot less. They're like mostly about other threats, and then you can be like, well, clearly, since these things aren't human, I dealt with them in a totally correct fashion because they don't look like me. But that has historical baggage, which is in the faction's canon. Like, if you're going back to like the Explorator Society or the Void Seekers, then they were fucking colonialists and they're fucking awful. And are we doing that to other dimensions? Maybe. Do we know that now? No. Are they trying to kill us because they're irritated at us fucking with that side of the Umbra?
Hey, I got a bunch of werewolves with an answer to that question.
Hiromi, you're the one who wrote the NB, right? The not in my back NIMBY, the not in my backyard. That
I sure
basically
did.
takes the threat and goes and sends it somewhere else. Where's it go? I don't know. It's not my problem now.
Right. Well,
Which is one of my favorite gadgets that I made. For those of you who didn't work on the book, the device in question, I want to say, is the NIMBY 5000. Basically, the idea is if you point it at something that's not from this dimension, and you pull the trigger, that thing goes to another dimension. Which one? You don't fucking care. The idea is not to fight the big, horribly evil, or not even necessarily evil, just horribly hostile thing. You're like, no, it's not my fucking problem anymore.
Right, make it someone else's problem. And the idea is not to get it home safe. Not to...
No, it does not go back to its home dimension. It just goes.
This is where the Nexus crawler winds up in Care Bear land.
Right.
I was about to
I
make the
demand
same
fan
quip
art.
about the deep dreaming.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Yeah,
Brilliant
there's
stuff.
a whole
It keeps
campaign to
showing
the
up here.
problems. Yeah.
Why is where is this coming from?
and that's the thing, right? And that's one of the things about I think about examining some of that stuff narratively, right? Because you ask the question, who's the bad guy? And as we've said multiple ways, multiple times, it depends on what side of the sword you're on. Depends on what side of the NIMBY you're on. If you're huddled in a pile of your own urine, staring at this multiple tentacled horror that's phasing in and out of reality and about to rip your head off, and Hiromi the Void Engineer comes popping over the curb with a giant NIMBY and pops that sucker somewhere else, Hiromi's the hero.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're the Care Bear who's like sitting on a cloud hugging your friend, loving stuff real hard, making your problems go away, that like through just loving it a lot with your belly. And then said like all you see is like Hiromi, like this much of Hiromi peeking out around like a tentacle as it flies in. They're not the hero of your story.
This is also such a sweet example of the Technocracy having to kind of face up to some of their own shit, because that is the definition of creating your own problems.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Wherever you dump that thing, it's gonna creep back and affect reality somehow, and that's on you.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And
I
if
think
the
I
reason why it came in was because the Technocracy, or Iteration X, was using its babies as power cells, I mean, it's not less upset now, and it's certainly not going to buy the, oh, we didn't know excuse, even if it's true.
We didn't know or ask or care. It can't be our fault.
Right.
I think I just figured out my next crossover chronicle that I'm going to run.
Yes.
Awesome.
That's a Doom/Animal Farm, and I love this. Hope
So I guess that leads into the next question, which is, what sort of tools will Technocracy Reloaded have for storytellers? So what should an ST look forward to in this book? Hint, hint, why they should back the Kickstarter.
All of it.
Yeah.
The less sardonic answer to that, there's a fairly extensive chapter in there specifically for storytellers. There's another chapter in there that presents a number of different meta plot options and says you could do this, or you could do this, or you could do this, maybe you could do this. There is a mega shit ton of really cool devices in there. There's a bunch of characters in there, but possibly, I don't want to say most importantly, but there's a lot of material in this that is either bringing the Technocracy forward from the 1990s, even further forward than was presented in the Technocracy Guide in 1998, 99, and the revised convention books, the last of which came out 8 years ago, and there's a lot of new material in there. The technocracy is brought forward into 2020 as opposed to, again, 1993. And there's a lot of stuff in there that has never been covered or addressed before in any technocracy book, in part because when we were first creating the technocracy, when we were 20-something-year-old suburban kids, we didn't think about stuff like generational members. What does the technocracy do if two technocrats have children? How are those children raised? How does the technocracy deal with? There were a little bit of hints of how the technocracy dealt with interspecies or intergender or interfaith conflicts within the technocracy. It was addressed a little bit in Guide to the Technocracy and Book of Secrets, but Technocracy Reloaded has a whole chapter about identity, gender, families, children, education, the legacies, punishments, that sort of all the various things that you need when you take into account, as we didn't when we were 20-something-year-old kids and didn't have kids of our own, that you're talking about a centuries-old, globe-spanning, dimension-spanning organization that had to figure out ways of dealing with what happens when people grow up.
Right.
And that's a major shift in the technocracy. It's not just a bunch of cool 20-somethings and 30-somethings in cyberware. It's addresses the idea of this, again, centuries old organization that some people, like some of the characters who are being played in the technocracy game we're doing, have been in the technocracy since birth.
Right. And
do you touch on
Really
what
interesting
happens when
concept.
you leave the technocracy? What does retirement look like for a techie? Does
That's
it
in there too.
get blown up? Yes. I can't
retired.
believe how often this has come up.
Well, and there's multiple approaches to that too, right? There's one of my favorite, and I hope this isn't spoiling anything for anybody that's watching, but one of my favorite, there's an entire chapter that basically contains pre-built characters that can be used as NPCs, can be used, to populate your game. There's also various creatures and whatnot in that chapter as well. But one of my favorites in there is just an old black suit who got a little slow, and they decided it was time for him to ride a desk. And he just doesn't know what else to do. And his perspective on it is, you could have just took me out back and shot me. I mean, this is the worst. That kind of almost like a retiring cop trope, or somebody who was on the street beat for a long time, and now for whatever reason they got to ride a desk. Never a story that that the earlier technocratic material would have necessarily lent itself toward, right? But I think that's a really cool take, really cool thing to explore.
There's my personal favorite chapter, and Hiromi can address this even more because they wrote most of it. But my personal favorite chapter in the book is how do we deal with this stuff on the front lines? There's a chapter that essentially is a frontline commander chewing out the green recruits and going, okay, these are the procedures for how we deal with these things. This is how it actually works. And hand that one over to Hiromi, because that's largely their material.
Yeah. So, fun fact about me: I used to be in special operations. I was an Army Ranger for years, and that means that I have a sergeant voice. That voice doesn't get used a whole lot these days, which is a good fucking thing. But it came out a lot for Technocracy Reloaded because as when you're a sergeant, when you are both boots on the ground and in charge of people, you are pissed at fucking everyone, because the people that are at the absolute front lines who are underneath your control don't know what they're doing. That's not their fault, but they don't know what they're doing. And the people who are not on the front lines, the people who are giving broad instructions, are just the dumbest motherfuckers ever. Officers are terrible. Fuck officers. So all of all of like the white hats just chilling out in the background. No, they don't know what's going on. And if they're sending us after werewolves or whatever, they're gonna get it wrong. And the green recruits who are like, oh, I have this big fucking plasma gun. Werewolf, whatever. No. Having a big fucking plasma gun means you might live. Fight as hard as you can with as big a guns as you can. And if it's still standing when the dust clears, fucking run. Because that's all you got. So there's a breakdown with most of the fun crossover campaigns that you might have about how the Technocracy would engage with those critters on a combative tactical level, not so much from a how are we going to talk to these people? What are we going to do? How are we going to bridge this gap? Because structurally, politically, that's less likely going to happen. Also, if that's the direction that your chronicle takes, there's going to be so many threads flying up in the air that's kind of going to be up to your players to knit those together, because there are so many reasons why politically none of these people are going to get along. So
there's a lot of
you enjoy that.
a lot of built-in conflict, and the idea of, and that's one of the things that we sort of tap into a little bit in chapter 8, but also in the thankfully bless the audience expanding player's companion, looking into, so how do we make these connections work, right? If you want to run a game where you're doing that, where you've got like, we accidentally made friends with the werewolf. As an example.
You survived the werewolves. Good fucking job.
Right.
We're gonna have a serious debriefing after this. Good fucking job.
Right.
Well,
so
and there
how do you
is
address those
in that
questions?
same chapter there's also a section on how which other creatures can be used as assets, and what the conditions for using other creatures as assets is also part of that chapter. That's part of one of the parts I wrote.
Absolutely, yeah. Like when you get into, if you encounter a HE, I believe is the acronym. Is it hemophagic?
Hemophagic.
Entities?
Yeah. In the chat, we've got people gaming out how Camarilla versus Technocracy throwdown would go.
I mean,
poorly.
Right, not fun for anybody.
Everybody.
Poorly.
Anybody read that Week of Nightmares section in Vampire? That's the last time the Technocracy got involved in vampire shit.
I feel like the Anarchs would be the winners there.
Yes.
Yeah.
That would be fair to say.
I want to say the Anarch Tradition Mage Alliance.
I feel like the real winners would be the Incanu, because they just wouldn't be there. Like, we're gonna keep hiding. Carry on.
Yeah.
We're gonna go find Golconda. Leave us alone.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's there's a lot of very cool stuff in the book that delves into sort of how to intersperse those ideas, but also one of the things that I got to work on that I was super proud of. Wherever possible, I think it's fair to say, and Hiromi and Sater can certainly correct me if I'm wrong here. I think it's fair to say that we've expended as much effort as we can to bring the technocracy forward from a social perspective and from a perspective of representation and from a perspective of knowing the world we live in and making it making them palatable and acceptable as an entity that people are going to want to engage with as players. Fair to say, right? But there are also some chunks where that doesn't mean because there were a lot of bad ideas back there that all the ideas were bad by any stretch. And I'm a big fan of the throwback, so we've got, you know, you're going to see some saber-toothed tigers in this book. You know?
Wait, Cybertooth?
Saber-tooth, yes, they're
Okay.
exactly.
I look forward to that.
You know, and those are old school
those go
enemies.
way back to Iteration X First Edition. Chris Hind, I believe, wrote those, and that's one of my favorite mage critters ever, just because the idea is so completely ludicrous that it's wonderful.
Right. I also included Sater's absolute favorite antagonist ever to show up in Mage, the
The Zigrugler, yeah.
Zigrugler, yeah.
Amazing.
There only 5 people who read First Edition are going to get it, but they're going to love it. So being able to sort of bring some of that stuff, and then also like confronting some of the things that like you would look at Mage in First Edition and say, oh, the Technocracy is responsible for that climate change, right? Technocracy brought that about. So how do we reconcile playing any character and being able to and being okay with it? Well, they're not. They understand it's a existential threat. So we've got, you know, a progenitor Iteration X team up to try to stop deforestation by throwing cybernetic, you know, saber-tooth tigers and hit marks at it. Sometimes that's how you solve a problem, you know? So, you know, keeping it fun, having that kind of stuff.
So,
But also, there's got to be some unintended consequences in there, right? Like anyone who's saying the technocracy totally intended this. Climate change, continents on fire, all part of the plan. No, that's unintended consequences. That's the masses being goddamn difficult and not getting in line with the program. And it's probably some paradox as well, right? Like, this isn't what
Remember I
anybody
said-
wanted.
You remember I said that officers are idiots?
Yeah, the introduction for the book, which I had written as a deliberately ironic inversion of the introduction that I'd written for Guide to the Technocracy. The introduction for Guide to the Technocracy back in 1998 was, you know, you like running water, thank us. You like lights, fine. Did a werewolf eat you? That's you're welcome. And at the beginning of Technocracy Reloaded, it's like, you've heard we won the war for reality. People use computers, everybody's on cell phones, and unicorns will fly out my ass. Does it look like we're winning? Really, seriously, look around the world. Does this look like what we had in mind? No.
Yeah, exactly. It's very, and one of the themes that we sort of, I think, come back to a number of times throughout the book is the idea that human ignorance is one of the greatest foes the technocracy faces, and and technocratic pride, hubris coming into play in the sense of, well, we've given them these tools, so naturally they're going to use them well. What do you mean they elected a reality TV show star for president? What? You know, like.
I actually think there's huge potential in a campaign of the technocracy and the traditions working against this horrible calcified reality that is benefiting nobody.
Check out Chapter 8. Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, it's crap.
yeah, so that sort of leads into the next question. There's a lot of crossover potential for technocrats to show up in other games. So if someone is running a werewolf game or a changeling game or a vampire game, and they want to include technocracy as, you know, antagonists, rivals, allies, even, you know, what sort of advice would you give them?
get Technocracy Reloaded.
Definitely. Back Technocracy Reloaded would be part one of that advice. My advice, and this is, I find that this for a while became very hard to do, but then there was like a gap, and now it's getting easier to do, which is keep as much of that close to your vest as the storyteller as possible. You know, there became a time where in the World of Darkness fandom, it felt, anyway, to me, like it was saturated with lore and the players were saturated with lore. Everybody knew everything. You couldn't pop a surprise on anyone. And that's never fun. And that happens, I think, with every game. But I think we're in a nice space right now where a lot of the people who are engaging the World of Darkness don't know these things. So if you're going to bring it in, if you're going to, you know, grab Technocracy Reloaded and use them as antagonists in your Changeling game or in your Werewolf game, keep it close to your vest and trickle that information out and use every contradiction and every piece of, you know, misdirection you can to keep them guessing, because that's where the excitement is, that's where the horror is, that's where and that's where the dramatic revelations of even like unlikely ally type, you know, alliances, that's where that comes in great, right? Like you don't know how this person's going to react until the moment. Are they going to be the knife in your back, or are they going to be the one that saves you? You know, being able to
unlikely allies available in Technocracy Reloaded companion as a stretch goal.
That's true.
Fund more now.
Yeah. So I mean, being able to draw that out would be my like big piece of advice.
Yeah, keep it mysterious. When I was running a werewolf game years ago, and the plot of the werewolf game was the pack was based in New Orleans. That there was a takeover. Somebody tried to assassinate the vampire prince, took out most of his court, her court actually, took out most of her court, firebombed her haven, and the werewolves got involved because suddenly shit starts blowing up and things catch fire and so forth. Turns out that the group behind this was gunning for the pack as well, and pack couldn't even see it coming because they had no idea all of this was going on. But in any case, at one point a group of black suits shows up because New Orleans is on fire. What else is the Technocracy going to do, you know, but show up and try and figure out why? But I didn't say a bunch of men in black show up from the Technocracy. I had a bunch of mostly men, but there were a few women in black just kind of show up and stare at the werewolves, and the werewolves are, and I'm like telling the werewolves, you feel this, you feel this unbearable compulsion to run away. And they did, because turns out that, you know, my mind magic procedures work really, really well on low willpower characters, even if those low willpower characters are 9-foot-tall killing machines. And I talk about this in Technocracy Reloaded as well as a tactic. It's like, you don't go toe to toe with a werewolf. You're gonna become wallpaper. Use your brain literally, because they have little tiny ones and you don't. And so but again, what I did from a storyteller perspective is I presented them as these mysterious entities who could do things that the werewolves couldn't understand. Not, and now the technocrat pulls out his this, and fires a forces procedure at you. Don't stick labels on them. Don't tip your hand as to what things or other characters are. Let it be all creepy and mysterious and shit, because that'll get your characters and your story a whole lot more it'll give the story a whole lot more edge and weird your players out a whole lot more than just, oh, he's using this from this book. Oh, I know how to handle those.
There are a few things more satisfying than a player saying, what the fuck is that thing? Yeah.
Yeah, I've always thought that one of the inherent joys, especially in the World of Darkness, is the thrill of discovery, of playing out your character, discovering usually something awful. Sometimes it's cool. Most of the time it's awful. But that's always fun.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Yeah, and there like if you're doing crossovers, there's a lot of lore that you can draw from, and if these things are crossing over, then there are inherently going to be sort of blank spots in the lore, because very few of these factions are going in with the idea that they know what is out there, and that space, that unknown area, is where all the really fun stuff happens.
Right.
That sort of where the rubber meets the road, I guess. Like if you wanted to put technocrats into, if you wanted to put void engineers into a hunter campaign, these people show up and they just wipe out whatever you were going after. Okay, one, do we still get paid? Two, what the fuck was that?
I think that'd be a really fun crossover. Right now, I'm in a mageling game. It's a mage changeling. I'm playing a changeling, and we've just found out that our enemies are the Technocracy. And so my changeling asked, well, what's a technocrat? And the way that the mage answered, he gave a very long, very detailed answer, which she heard as, these are the assholes responsible for the shattering.
Which one could argue is vaguely valid, to
Yeah,
some
no,
degree.
the answer is like, they started in the Renaissance, and they really believe in like reason and practicality. And so I'm playing as she, and she's like, Renaissance, you say?
Look at my sword, I found someone to blame.
Exactly.
Right. So she's very motivated right now to find these guys and ask what the fuck.
Well, and I tell you, I know we're here promoting Technocracy Reloaded for Mage 20th Anniversary Edition, which I would like to once again remind you is on Kickstarter, because I can't go 10 minutes without a plug. But one of my absolute, I do have a V5 game I'm running right now with friends, not online, just chilling out as a Steam vent. And one of my favorite things about that experience has been looking in the back of the book and seeing the stats for a werewolf and a mage in vampire rules, because there aren't any werewolf and mage rules. And that, A, was a hell of a dose of nostalgia. Been a long time since I've needed to use, dominate to handle mind magic. But also reinvigorates that sense of like, you don't know what the fuck you're going toe to toe with. You have no idea. And so that's one of the beautiful things about a new edition being rolled out, is having that, like, getting to reframe things in the context of the worlds that they're being set in.
That was one of my favorite things. I'm going to throw in a plug here. Of all the stuff I've worked on in the last few years, one of my favorites, and Hiromi was part of this book, in Gods and Monsters for Mage 20, go buy it. But is the section, yay! I had a absolute blast writing the section at the end of chapter 1 that deals with were creatures, vampires, fey beings, and ghosts, because I presented them, and did the same in Victorian Mage as well, as these alien entities that have strange agendas and odd powers that you don't really understand. And that to me was a hell of a lot more fun than just, it's a Ghetto Federus. It looks to be rank 5.
Yeah.
And it just making it mysterious and spooky again was fun. I had a blast with that.
I guess kind
So-
of tagging on. Sorry. Go
No,
ahead.
continue.
No, go, please.
Kind of tagging on to what everybody said. I feel like the whole way through I've just been saying what everybody else said, but with more words and more hand gestures. But one thing that's really important when you're running crossover, especially in World of Darkness, is to remember that your starting system, your starting lore, is written from the perspective of the werewolves or the changelings. And when you start introducing other factions, you've got to remember that they're all written as the heroes of their own story. So you've got to take a step back and you've got to just maybe ditch some of those assumptions about a werewolf will always win in a fight. It will, though. It will. Can Maria control all of the city politics? Because no, the Technocracy also control all of the city politics. So you as a storyteller are going to have to do some thinking about your specific storyline and your specific setting and which parts of the lore you want to build in and exactly how you want to distribute the power. Because within every World of Darkness book, 100% of the power is accounted for by the heroes of that book.
Yep.
That's an excellent point.
Yeah. So in that vein, I just really love how all these questions lead into each other. So what are some common pitfalls that you've seen storytellers make when using the Technocracy, and what advice would you give them to avoid those mistakes?
How long do you have?
We have 27 more minutes.
Cancel the next show. We got things to say.
Do your best Micro Machines voice, Sater.
You know, yesterday Travis asked how long I wanted this show to run, and I'm like, well, we usually run for about 2 hours, but you know, I've got the endurance to go longer.
As Travis and Hiromi can attest, we could go all day when we got the three of us.
Yeah, we are a bit
two of us in a room or a chat room.
Bit chatterboxy. It's true.
So the two big issues I've seen with people running the Technocracy, either as antagonists or protagonists, is making them completely powerless, saying, oh, the Nefandi are the scary ones, the Technocracy are just these dumb guys with guns. How people get that idea, I don't know, but I have seen it done. Or making them all-powerful, where the program is completely flawless, the Technocracy are winning, there's no wriggle room, there's no room for the Technocracy to mess up, there's no real room for other factions to get one over on them. And I think it all comes back to the really good discussion at the beginning of this episode about how none of these factions is perfect, none of them is entirely in control anymore. I think the important thing when you're running a Technocracy is balance. Keep them scary, but don't use them like a hammer to crush your players. She says, reflecting on an 18-month campaign. We lost so many characters.
Well, and
the sort of fun thing with even like if you're using them as a near all-powerful force is that just because they win that particular encounter doesn't mean that they did it without consequence. Like you could spin up a meta plot where all of the success that they've had directly fed into global warming, and so now they've wrecked the planet. Like that's not far-fetched at all. You could be like, okay, so you won. At what cost? They're the supreme thing that can smite us down at any moment. But and you, like, regardless of which side you want to play with that, there's a lot of fun options. Like if you beat them back, you're playing with them as antagonists, and you're like, oh, okay, so they are globally this organization that has all of this power, can pull all of these strings, but at a more micro level, it's Fred and Amir down the street, and we can just punch them in the fucking face. We're gonna catch shit for it. But Fred and Amir are just two dudes.
Oh, someone just said something interesting in the chat, so I'm going to take us on a little tangent.
Oh, please.
Everybody's going to try to wrench me back online. Somebody said in the chat, Paradox is always on the storyteller's side, and I think this is a really useful point that ties into any antagonist that you're using. No, Paradox is on the story's side.
That's true.
Paradox is there to push the action forward. It's like any other rule, and that's the same with the Technocracy. You've got to use them as an antagonist that creates interesting directions for your players to go in, not an antagonist that stops them in their tracks because there's no story there.
Well, and
it's in the name, right? You're telling a story.
I would say that, and I think my players would attest to this. I've probably used Paradox almost as much as a ally to the characters as I ever have as an antagonist, even when that ally was the friend that's slapping you in the face going, dude, you can't act that way in public. You know?
The first
Friends don't let friends throw fireballs.
in the first mage game that I ran, my then girlfriend Shadow was playing the character Atropos, who in Mage has been commemorated as the character doing the power salute with the lightning around her fist in second edition. But in any case, Atropos and someone else were in a firefight with some black suits, New World Order guys, and the New World Order guys ended up scoring a paradox backlash. And I don't remember how time magic was involved, because this is 1993 when I ran this game. But in any case, the paradox backlash occurs, and this little old man in a white suit comes up. And he's like that to the black suits, and they're like, ah! And one of them shoots him, and of course nothing happens because it's fucking Wrinkle. He's a demigod, and he just snaps his fingers, he shakes his head, snaps his fingers, and they both disappear. And Atropos, who is this total badass, just falls to her knees and like, oh no! And he comes over to her and goes, "You're not going to do that again, are you?" And she's like, no, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Keep your nose clean, kid, or I'll be back. And you disappear.
Exactly. I mean, yeah, that's what paradox is. I think when it's best used is when it's kind of that cautionary tale / enlightenment moment, right? Because Mage is always about pushing forward that enlightenment, giving the player the opportunity. It's no fun if you just spread them to ash the first time. When you get to the 20th backlash, okay, yeah, you've had your chances, you've taken your lumps, but it's a teaching tool. But I was to answer the question though, and I'm saying this really before I forget, the best way I think to use them in any antagonist is just to remember that you're playing a pipe organ, not a triangle. They have notes. Use those notes. No matter where you land on the Technocracy, if it's the same place over and over again, they're going to get stale fast. And the Technocracy really does have a lot of different approaches and different tactics they can take. And if you're real smooth, you can make the players think you're playing a triangle while you're playing a pipe organ. And then you're in the sweet spot.
I guess the primary, to wrap this up without a huge long tangent, the primary approach that I would suggest with the Technocracy is, one, remember they're human, and two, remember that humans can be assholes. There's this tendency to go, oh, but those are human beings, or oh, they've taken all the edge out of it because they humanized them. Like, have you read much of human history? Because humans are fucking awful.
Have you met humans? God.
Right,
Yeah,
yes.
you met humans, exactly.
Spent an afternoon with one.
Humanizing an antagonist does not mean that antagonist suddenly becomes soft and cuddly and you should sympathize with it. The most horrible things imaginable have been done by human beings and imagined by human beings. And because humans are awful, basically any horrible thing that a human being has imagined, that person's someone has probably done it to some other human being. So,
well, and we're especially fucking insufferable when we know we're right.
Right.
And the Technocracy knows they're right.
Every mage knows. The scariest thing about mages is that they've got 5 willpower points, frankly.
Yeah.
But I think that humanizing them is even more important for the Technocracy because as a faction, they're a faction that's all about order and protocol and doing things the same way. But when you start bringing human quirks into that, it makes them unpredictable, and that makes them terrifying. Nothing scares a player more than a man in black with an agenda that you didn't predict. Why did he not shoot me? This is worse, you know?
Yep, that beautifully put.
I mean, on the storyteller side, maybe a black suit shows up, shoots you, and then walks off, and you're like, what have they changed? What's gonna happen to me? We need to see a doctor right now and get this thing out of me. And on the storyteller side, you're like, fuck, I botched.
It's true.
In the prelude from age 20, there's because it's the prelude from age 20 is shown from alternating first person perspectives of two unreliable narrators, and when you're seeing things in one point through John Courage's wildly unreliable memory of how he met Leanne. Leanne was like a 16 or 17-year-old heroin addict who was basically being schooled in occult bullshit by her pimp, and she awakened and basically blew the guy all over the walls. And when the two black suits walk in, they're like, nah, that used to be human over there, and there's this quivering wreck over here who actually has a lot of talent and potential. And John Courage is like, I could bring her in and I could destroy everything interesting about her, and she would be a perfectly safe, perfectly normal member of society. I think there's probably more to it than that. I'm going to go around protocol and bring her to a tradition mage I know I can trust, because she might prove to be more important later than just another burned out teenager who can't remember what she did. And that decision ends up saving both of their lives and changing the course of the meta plot on some levels for the next 25 years.
Well, and one of the things that I love most about Mage is in the absence of a storyteller telling you why that occurred, there are 20 in-system ways that could have been brought about through the use of magic, right? That could have been, Agent John Courage walking in the room, looking things over with time and entropy and going, taking her in's not the best call. That could have just as easily been, something using mind magic to read her and guess at the probability that she would, make it through conditioning in one piece. There's 100 ways to parse that system-wise, and therefore to bring those narrative beats to your table, right? And that's one of the things I think is very cool about the way the fiction breaks out in Mage, because it's not I throw a fireball necessarily. It's not I cast magic missile at the darkness. There's subtlety and nuance to it, and then you get to flavor that nuance as a storyteller. So that's also a neat. I love Mage so much.
Yeah,
Best game. Sorry, Werewolf.
Yeah,
and ironically, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just saying, ironically, Werewolf was my favorite for a long time because Werewolf is what I play for fun and Mage is my job.
Yeah, I get that.
She's like, boy, do I ever.
So I guess with that, we'll wrap up with one last question. What is your favorite style of a Technocracy game to run?
Hunter
I've never
with
run
bigger
one,
guns.
so I'm not sure.
Well, what would be your favorite?
So the biggest influence of my particular take on the Technocracy, it was when the old 1990s show La Femme Nikita, which really presented this super morally ambiguous counter-terrorist group, because on one hand they do appalling things. They kill innocent people, they torture each other, they torture innocent people, they blow shit up and all this, and yet they're always going, but by doing this we stop this, but by doing this we stop this. And as the show goes on, the main character gets more and more convinced that the end is not justifying the means, and her supervisors keep showing, well, this was a horrible thing, but we prevented this. And that sense of a combination of stylish ultraviolence and moral ambiguity, I found fascinating. Two, I found a hell of a lot more interesting than just, I am the man in black, zap. And so my ideal, if I were running a Technocracy game, would be like a cross between La Femme Nikita and Men in Black International. Because it'd be fun and lots of shit would happen and you'd always be wondering why.
I feel compelled to answer this last because I'm literally about to run it. So.
Yeah.
Hey, Roman?
So the other line that I work on is, or rather have contributed towards, is Hunter, and that there's a lot of really interesting parallels between the Technocracy and Hunter, and I would kind of like to see either a crossover or basically Technocracy as like the Aegis group, but with way better toys, exploring what the fuck is out there, like, because all of the data that we have, all of the stat blocks and whatever, the characters don't know that, and you can always make up more stuff. Like, you want to introduce things that are scary and mysterious. There are options, and there's a lot of potential out there for dimensional beings and crossing over, for you to be like, oh, okay, so there's something out there. We don't really know what it is, but it has potential to wreck the world. So we need to stop it, whatever the hell that means. Someone in the chat's like, supernatural. I'm like, yeah, kinda.
Yeah, but like,
Winchesters with better clothes.
Right. Winchesters
and,
when they clean up.
Better fucking gender. Less girlfriends and fridges.
Oh my god.
Ideally 0.
Yeah, I think my ideal blend is supernatural, but we'll come back to that, crossed with Mission Impossible, because I really like fucking around with different factions within the Technocracy, breaking it down and not making it a monolithic organization with like one goal, one program. It's no fun if you haven't got internal affairs after you at some point in the Chronicle. But really what I like about Supernatural is that it takes these people and forces them to confront the supernatural and to confront their own mysticism. Because we haven't talked about this, but technocrats are mages, and they do have avatars, and they do have past lives, and they haven't always been technocrats. And none of them is like a perfect example of a technocrat because they're human. So I just like messing with them and breaking them down and wrecking their paradigm. That's my game.
That sounds like a lot of fun.
I want you to run a Technocracy game for me.
Yeah, me too now.
But so I'm gonna put my foot in my mouth here, and I'm gonna write a check that that I hope my ass can cash over the next 4 weeks. What I would really like to see, I guess, would be best qualified as a cross between Twin Peaks and Men in Black, with just the slightest bit of Twilight Zone sprinkled into it. Especially on the Twin Peaks side, I like the idea of, the technocrats are going to run into shit that, like, I have no idea what the fuck that is. The owls are not what they seem. I don't know what that means any more than you do, but
But
we better we better deal with it. You know. But I also do love the lightheartedness and casual nature of, like, particularly the original Men in Black films, but I say that largely only because I have not yet seen International. But just this mix between, like, absolute bonkers, balls to the walls, gonzo, you know, everything dialed up to 11 weird, and the absolute casual, straight-faced manner in which that is engaged with. You know, this is just a fact of life. This is just a thing. You know, this is just a dude with tentacles. You know? Shoot him in his face, it'll grow back. It's fine. You know, so that's kind of the mix I want to try to hit, and I know that that's setting up a high expectation and a high bar, but I think if I can pull it off, it's gonna be a lot of fun.
Yeah, well, I think you just
Fingers
created
crossed.
a lot of interest in your Tuesday Technocracy game.
Yeah, I hope so. Yeah, come check us out. It's gonna be fun. We had a hoot last night, and that was just session 0. So
Yeah, we didn't
Yeah.
even shoot anything.
It was a lot of fun to watch.
you're gonna start. I wasn't shitting. I'm the first. As soon as we go live, I'm shooting. John's gonna be ducking bullets.
That's what he was grown and about to do.
Well,
Precisely.
thank you all so much. Are there any closing comments that anyone wants to make other than go back to Kickstarter?
No. Thank you, everybody. Both thank everybody who's on the panel today, and thank everybody who's watching. Thank you, thank you, Mage fans, because well, we wouldn't be here and we wouldn't be doing this if it weren't for you. And as I often say, for all the people who are involved with Mage and all the various different strange iterations, so to speak, of the IP rights involved, ultimately it's your world, it's your game, and the magic is yours.
Here, absolutely.
I just had a wonderful idea for a campaign that someone should steal. Tell your players that they're doing a tradition or a Technocracy campaign. That's not what it is.
Just swap
That's
them.
the kind of mind fucking that you can and should do. Why should the characters actually know what's going on?
Like right in the middle of session 3, like the simulation ends. or did it begin?
There's a wonderful film I want to mention. Real quickly, because I don't know how many people have seen it or even heard of it, but I saw it about halfway through writing Technocracy, my sections of Technocracy Reloaded. It's a Russian film called Hardcore Harry, which is a first person. The entire thing is first person in real time, of essentially a cyborg waking up and immediately shit starts happening. And the whole movie is just, why is shit happening? This shit is happening. This shit is happening. And the story just goes wild, all kinds of twists and everything. It never stops moving. But it's a wonderful example of what Hiromi was just saying about, you think the minute you think you know what's going on, it just goes, no, you were wrong. You were wrong again. Yeah. And it's just a phenomenal movie.
Extremely well done.
I was going to use the game as an example, but Hardcore Harry is so much more fun.
It's really astonishingly well done. And it's all filmed first person. They used like parkour stunt people to do most of the performance. That movie is so phenomenal. Almost threw up in the movie theater watching it though. And I don't get motion sick, but I was like dead center first row, and there's a particular scene, if you're sensitive to this sort of thing, it's the only reason I'm telling you this. There's a particular scene where he wakes up at one point and his eyes are not where they belong. very disconcerting when you're right, when it's taking your whole field of vision.
Nice. Full screen experience. Got it.
Yeah. Cool. Fine film,
So-
though.
Well, thank you all so much
Thank you.
for being here.
Thank you for
I
having
can't
us.
wait to see the final Technocracy Reloaded. It sounds like it's going to be amazing. And so I guess we'll just go around and let people know what we are working on and where they can find us. Let's start with Hiromi.
In addition to the Tuesday Technocracy game, I'm also in a Saturday Scarred Lands campaign where I grow green scales because I'm playing an Asathi wizard. Asathi is the like lizard men but cooler because it's Scarred Lands, and
Snake
Scarred Lands
folk.
is just kind of cool. Yeah. I also have a bunch of short story anthologies that I'm in. I'll throw a link to that in the chat, or rather, I'll throw a link to that into the Zoom so that someone else can throw it into the chat because I'm not a moderator.
You're not. Wow.
Whoa!
I think you're gonna get that
Am I
fixed
getting-
pretty soon.
Am I getting privileges elevated?
Oh, not on this browser. I'll make sure by next week you do, though. I forgot. I'm not logged into the right account on this browser to do that for you. Sorry.
And so where can people find you?
People can find me on Facebook and Twitter. Twitter's probably the better of the two because I just sort of throw all of my stuff in there, and it's very easy to find cool stuff.
Awesome. Travis, where can people find you? What do you want to promote?
Oh, aside from obviously go please back Technocracy Reloaded because I want to get that Unlikely Allies Part 3 stretch goal. But yeah, that's an awesome place to find me. I am everywhere on the internet as @TravisLegg pretty much, including Patreon, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, though I'm not very active on there. And I have a lot of Scarred Lands stuff that's coming out through Onyx Path, so definitely head over to Drive Through RPG and check those out, including some VTT virtual tabletop specific encounters to give people a little bit easier time playing with their friends during the current situation. And then, yeah, I also will be streaming later tonight on my channel with Rachel. In fact, we're going to be playing Scarred Lands Sins of Shelzar. It's so fun. We had this 59 episode Forgotten Realms campaign, so everybody was like 15th level and all big and buff, and about a month and a half ago we've gone back to first level. It's so fun watching you all be squishy and nervous about literally everything. I can't remember the last time y'all ran from a city guard. It was a beautiful thing.
I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be fun.
So yes, please visit. I'll type it in the chat. It's Plastic Age Plays on Twitch.
Yeah. Kat, where can we find you? What should we pick up from you?
You should come and watch me post stupid opinions and really cute dog pictures on Twitter as @PerpetualGloom. There are 3 dogs, they're all the cutest. You should look out for the Altered Carbon RPG that's coming out. You should obviously look out for Werewolf, but you should get a taste for what you're getting by going to the DM's Guild and maybe buying some of my Gothic Earth horror adventures, or Ravenloft horror adventures, or Weird Dark Fairy Tales there.
Yeah.
Well,
They've all got hags in. They're all awesome.
This week they have that deal going on, right?
Yeah. So
yes, they do.
If people are not aware, normally community content programs, DM's Guild, Storytellers Vault, everything like that, normally the royalty split is 50-50. for the next 2 weeks as part of their Play It Forward promotion. All author royalties are 100%.
Oh,
Yeah, so if you're
I'll have to buy some shit.
if you're eyeballing the Storytellers Vault or the DMs Guild, now is the time. Drop that money
Yes.
because it's going straight to the creators. It's one of the best ways to offer that support. So
Yes.
go buy
a
everything
lot of
Kat's worked on because she's amazing.
Yeah, a lot of it is on sale as well. Yeah, I'll plug my stuff when it's my turn.
I believe
Yeah, so where can people find the Altered Carbon game or the Werewolf game? Where should we look for those?
You should make use of your time two roads and look forward to autumn 2020. Sorry.
Any publisher that we should follow?
They're both coming from Hunters Entertainment, so follow them on Twitter, join their Discord, follow them on Facebook. They still post blogs.
Neat. Sater, where can we find you? We've posted a bunch of links in the chat.
Yeah, the best place to find me would be either in the Mage Facebook group or on my Patreon, which, according to my Patreon page, anyone who becomes a member automatically unlocks 331 exclusive pieces of content. Plus, there's a bunch of public stuff up there as well. My Patreon has short fiction. It has games. It has essays, cut material, sketches, me messing around on my bass, musical tracks from my now unfortunately late group, Telesterion, and all kinds of things like that. And I'm working on a number of things, including coming up shortly the non-White Wolf self-owned novel Red Shoes, which is currently in layout, which we will also be doing an audiobook version of. A friend of mine is recording that now. A compilation of my self-owned short fiction, again, not White Wolf, this is my work. It's appeared in places like Weird Tales and Sword and Sorceress and so forth. That's called Valhalla with a Twist of Leaf. That's currently in editing. There's more about that on my Patreon. You can also find my work, Power Chords, Music, Magic, and Urban Fantasy, and Goblin Markets, The Glitter Trade, from Quiet Thunder Productions, which is on Drive-Thru RPG. Can also be found through Amazon. And you can also find me on Twitter, on twitter.com /SoderosBrucato, and my Facebook author page, which is author Facebook groups, something bunch of numbers, but is Soderos Phil Brucato author.
And seriously, you are one of the most prolific Patreon creators I'm aware of. There's so much stuff on your page. It's awesome.
Thank you.
So yeah, it's well worth the investment to support. I recommend everyone do so twice.
Thank you. And Travis also has a Patreon. You should support that too.
That's
I
sweet
do,
of you. Thank you.
and he supports me.
I appreciate it. Thank you. Yeah, I'm not nearly as prolific, but I do put some things up there from time to time.
Yeah, we got a bunch of stuff on Storytellers Vault and DM's Guild, I think.
Yeah, I had a productivity burst for a while there. There's something like 500 things with my name on it.
Holy crap!
In the OBS, in the various OBS spheres between my own company, DM's Guild, Storytellers Vault, things I've worked on for Onyx Path, things I've worked on for other publishers. I think I have like 486 was the last count. Things with my name on it. Yeah, I was busy bee.
Nice.
Yes.
But, that's what you do if you want to eat. And as we can all see, I like to eat. So
Nice. So my name is Rachel. I am Stolen Fire pretty much everywhere. Sometimes it's Stolen Fire, sometimes it's Stolen Fires, depending on who got there first. Find me on Twitter, Instagram. I'm going to be in Travis's Skyland game later this evening. I'm looking forward to that. Tomorrow evening, I'm going to be right back here running a Changeling the Dreaming Chronicle, currently set in year 1200 in Constantinople. So things are about to get very interesting.
Hmm.
Yeah, I have a Ko-Fi, so if you like what I'm up to, if you like what I'm doing, I invite you to buy me a coffee if you feel like it. I'm on Storytellers Vault as well. I just came out with Gifted and Talented. It is a short Changeling Chronicle, Changelings in High School. It comes with pre-generated character sheets and a short storyteller's guide. It's designed for new players because more people should be playing Changeling. It's awesome.
It is
That's
awesome.
one other thing we should plug too, Rachel. Carmilla.
Yes, yes, I did a group read of Carmilla organized by the wonderful Steffi Devan. You can find us on YouTube. I read chapter 9, The Doctor. And which chapter did you read?
I read chapter 8, The Search. It's
Oh,
on youtube.com/, I want to say, Mistress of Whispers.
yes.
Sweet. So we have like the middle of the book right here with us, right? Is it?
Yep.
Yeah.
The
You could
important bit.
also, yeah, you could also find us on hashtag We Read Carmilla and hashtag Team Carmilla. Pretty much
So
everywhere.
Jacqueline worked on that too, didn't she?
She did.
Yeah.
That's what I thought. I saw her post about that yesterday, or the day before. Cool. I didn't know you all were involved. I'll check that out.
Yeah, it's a amazing cast, and Steffi's amazing. I had the privilege of working with her on Legend lore, and she's just top notch developer. And what a setting! Can't wait to see it come to fruition because it's a blast to work on.
So, yeah, follow our stuff, buy our stuff. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to kickstart Technocracy Reloaded.
Please,
Thank you.
please do.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you all so much. Wash your hands.
Yeah.
Fucking hands.
Stay the fucking door.